Hello, everyone, and welcome to this conversation. Really excited to have you joining us today. This is a co-hosted conversation between Conscious Capitalism Rochester as well as RocGrowth. So before we get started, just wanted to give you a really brief intro of the two organizations that are co-hosting this conversation today, because we probably have some people that have been to both organizations meetings, but many that may be learning about the other for the first time. So first, Conscious Capitalism Rochester is part of a global movement. We have a local chapter here in Rochester, but there's about 50 chapters around the world and growing. It's really a movement based on the four key tenets of conscious capitalism. So these are companies that have a purpose beyond just making profits. You need profits to survive. You got to keep the lights on, but the purpose can and maybe even should go beyond that. In addition, they have a stakeholder orientation. We've been hearing a lot about stakeholder capitalism lately, right? In terms of not just doing what is right for the stockholders, although they are certainly an important stakeholder, but also how do we balance the needs of the stockholders with the needs of the customers, the community, the employees, the environment? All of those really need to be, in the long run, need to be thriving and healthy for the business to be thriving and healthy. The next two elements are conscious leadership and conscious culture. And so this is really about leaders that are servant leaders, that are trying to really live by these organizational principles and lead through the values. And they have a culture where it really values the well-being of the employees, having a diverse and inclusive workforce, having a place where people feel like they belong and feel like they can learn and grow. And so we're really excited to be hosting with RocGrowth for the first time, although both organizations have had probably monthly or bi-monthly meetings for quite a long time. But this was a great opportunity to work together. So RocGrowth really exists to create creative collisions, or maybe today it can be conscious collisions between organizations in our community, between creatives, between entrepreneurs, really having some of these conversations. And so we're excited to partner with RocGrowth. And we're also really inspired and grateful to welcome Steve Metzger, the Chief Executive Officer of LaBella Associates, Mohammed Ahamed, the Chief Diversity Officer of Engaging Diversity and Inclusion, and also Jeff Wight, the VP of Operations of General Code. We've got these two great organizations, General Code and LaBella, who are really these work in process case studies that we're going to learn about today, because there have been, especially over the last year, many more organizations who are recognizing, even if they've for a while knew that diversity and inclusion were important, that are recognizing more that it needs to be more of an urgent priority. And these are two companies who have been at it for a while and have a lot of great insights to share, but also they're going to share some of the struggles along the way and the things that haven't worked as well. And so hopefully you can learn from them in terms of what you're going to hopefully bring back to your own organization. And the second half of our discussion will be opening up to questions from the audience. So feel free to be thinking about those or throw those into the chat for when we get there. Really quick, just before we dive right in, is I wanted to thank, these are the visionary partners of conscious capitalism. So Accelerate, Clean Craft, and the Bonadillo Group. We wouldn't be able to do this without you, and are also grateful to our sustaining partners, Benefit Link, Home Leasing, Nazareth College School of Business and Leadership, SWBR, 2 Point Capital, and Grit Health. And so without further ado, I wanted to dive right into some of these conversations and stories. And really, Jeff, I think we'll start with you. I just wanted to hear a little bit about where in the journey of General Code were you deciding that this was going to be a really essential piece of the business that you wanted to create and the culture that you wanted to create?
Thanks, Andrew, and thanks for the opportunity. Well, a little bit of background about General Code. We're a 6-year-old business. We were started in Rochester. We've got about 130 employees at this point. We've always had kind of a natural diversity. I think it kind of connects to the nature of our work. Let me start by apologizing if I say any of this incorrectly, because, I'm trying to do the work and say the right things, but, we have gender and gender identity diversity, right? Most of our management and senior management is female. We have people that are trans. We have people of different national origins. We have a number of people who are first-generation immigrants, English as second language. We have people of color, but that's all kind of happened organically. It was really just kind of in the last probably 5 years or so that we recognized, that, diversity in and of itself, brings value to the organization. And we haven't really put any focus on not only having a diverse population, but also just making people feel like they belong or having like inclusivity. So, within the last 5 years, and again, it started with just looking at our kind of organization and demographics, and it has kind of accelerated over the last couple of years as it's become more kind of a conscious thought for everybody, but us, included.
Yeah, so sounds like at least the spirit of it maybe was part of your organization, but it does really take intentional effort to do this. And so when you all did decide that this was something you wanted to be intentional and wanted to make some real progress on, where did you start? Because I think that that's sometimes a stumbling block for organizations. They put out the statement, they support diversity and inclusion, but they're not really sure how to get started.
Sure, sure. So a little more background about General Code. One of the things that we pride ourselves on is being a great place to work. It's a cornerstone of our strat map, our strategic plan. All of our kind of strategic initiatives are kind of built off from that. So a big part of being a great place to work at General Code is tied to our company values. We've had for the entire lifespan of the organization, we've had a defined set of company values. Things like honesty and integrity, teamwork, personal responsibility. So that's really integrated into our culture. It's where it kind of manifests. Talent management process, personal evaluations are tied to our values. People are essentially measured against how well they live our company values, both in their work and their interactions with others. So kind of the first action we took when we recognized, I guess, that this needs to be a focus for us is we added a new value to our company values. And, that may not sound like much, like you said, making a statement and putting it out there. But the adding diversity and inclusivity to our company values as tightly as the company values are integrated into our culture and our daily lives really is, for the purposes of our company, is making a commitment. And so that now that integrates into so many different aspects of the company as far as what we discuss and what we tie our strategic initiatives back to, how staff are evaluated, like I mentioned, how we present ourselves to our potential clients and other businesses that we interact with. So that was kind of the first and major and most visual step in our process.
Yeah, well, and I know that you've also been, in the theme of conscious leadership. You've been leading by example as well. You've been part of this. Is actually part of this conversation came out of some of the exploring racism groups. So can you tell a little bit about why you decided to make that commitment and maybe what you've learned along the way?
I think for me personally, being part of the exploring racism group was more about my own awareness and what I could bring back to our organization. And I realized that I had never looked at I guess my own unconscious bias or thought about what role I may play in a larger kind of systemic issue around racism and inequality. So when that opportunity arose and I had the opportunity to participate with that group and meet everybody and do that work, I gladly jumped on the opportunity. What I shared, it was kind of twofold. It was, for me personally, it was about bringing it back to my workplace, and helping to continue to grow and evolve our culture. But also as a person, as a human being, and as a parent, I'm raising two young children, and I want my kids to grow up, better than I am. I don't think I'm bad, but I want them to be better, right?
Great. Yeah. Yeah. And we'll make sure to link to that in the chat. For those that aren't familiar, the exploring racism groups are a great way to kind of do some of that personal work, and they've been at it for quite a while, and it's continuing to grow, which is exciting to see. So in terms of looking back at the organization then, Jeff, what have been some of the kind of big wins? You added this to your company values. I think we both know that the maybe that's the first step and the scary step, right? Because then you're publicly committing to it. So what were some of the things that kind of flowed from that in terms of how you actually bring that to life in the organization?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, just what we call, I guess, socializing the concept and making people understand why we consider this. We as senior leaders consider this important. Getting input, back from staff on their thoughts. We took advantage of the 21-day equity challenge that was going on in Rochester. What our contribution was is we paid staff to participate. The nature of our work is we track our time kind of like a law firm, right, down to the 10th of an hour. And then that it's like billable time, that's the nature of our business. So, we gave staff the opportunity to do this work, participate in that program, and get paid for it, So it wasn't mandatory, but we had participation. Something like 72% of staff participated in this program, and it generated some interesting discussions and dialogue, and people coming forward, reacting positively to what they learned, and also coming forward with questions. Well, I never really understood this, and so I think that was a win, getting not only engagement and participation, but getting commitment from the organization that we were going to kind of put our money more where our mouth is, if you will.
Definitely. Sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to ask, I know that, I know as we've kind of framed up, and I really so appreciate both you and Steve kind of being open and vulnerable a little bit too, to share that, I think that many of us, despite our best intentions, in the workplace, trying to make these changes, it doesn't always go as planned. So has there been anything along the way that has either made you stumble and or gaps that you're noticing that are kind of some future goals?
Yeah. So one of the things, coming out of the worst of the pandemic last year, we had a kind of a hiring freeze for last year because of the uncertainty in the economy, especially since most of our clients are in the local government space. And, with the downturn in the economy, and that has an impact on tax revenue, which has an impact on the ability for governments to fund programs. So we've lifted that hiring freeze. So we took advantage of that coming into this year to look at our hiring plans for this year, to kind of take a deep dive into our job descriptions and our postings to try and uncover, unconscious bias. So we looked at things like, relevant work experience, educational requirements for positions that we were posting. And we really, we loosened them up. We took away what we kind of some of that thinking, like, well, the only way somebody could be successful in a position is if they have this, and this pedigree. And, it's when you step back and you think about it, and you think about different perspectives and different experiences, it's not necessarily critical. It's not like we're hiring, doctors, where people have to, or people that have to be, I don't know, certified in something, right? It's a lot more kind of looser than that, I guess, if you will. So that was the first thing we did. And then we looked at our hiring practice as far as where we post and how we post, because what I had really hoped for was that, in our hiring this year, this is an opportunity for us to bring in new perspectives and different perspectives. But as far as stumbling, it didn't work. We didn't. We got our normal kind of pool of applicants. We didn't have really a diverse population, to be looking across when we were trying to fill, these positions in our organizations. So looking at, I think that's the first thing, is trying to understand what is it about our hiring and our hiring practice and how we recruit, that isn't getting us different perspectives, different experiences.
Great. Well, that's perfect. Perfect segue into really inviting Mohammed into this conversation. So Mo is the CEO and Chief Diversity Officer of EDI Executive Search. Has a lot of experience both in the executive search, but also in the culture change process. And really, when we're talking about hiring, I know I've learned so much from Mo. But I think, there's kind of almost two parts to this, Mo, that maybe you can elucidate on a little bit as we're sharing maybe some of your best practices and things that you've learned. But I think sometimes, as Jeff was mentioning, it's part of what can you do or what should you do, to take away some of the elements of bias, to make sure that the application is reaching the right folks in the first place. But then sometimes you even need to go further upstream in terms of how do you start to build a pipeline so that there's more people that are there that know about your company, that are qualified for the job, that have all those sorts of things. So anything kind of in your experience that you can share in terms of maybe some case studies or client examples or best practices and some of those things that people should think about?
Thank you, Andrew, and thank you, Jeff, for this background that you explained to us and expressed some of the challenges that you've had. It's always an opportunity to engage in these conversations whenever it's necessary. And whenever we get the chance to have these conversations, I wanted to capture and really capture a few things that I've heard, Jeff, when you were speaking. One is the recognizing the self-exploitative nature of what it is. I think we have can everybody hear me still?
I can hear you.
Thumbs up, cartwheels, handstands, whatever works for people. All right. So this idea of a self-exploratory journey that was necessary to bring Steve to this position of understanding what it would take to actually, Jeff, to understanding what it would take to engage in this work in a more intentional way. That is where the rubber meets the road often, because we're conditioned to really oftentimes just say that it's not me, it's the other. And as a result, when we use the otherness to address these issues, then we will never be able as leaders to really think critically about what or how complicit we may be in our leadership approach to addressing some of these issues within our respective organizations. So that's a very important thing to pay attention to. The second thing is, who is championing and helping in designing and redefining all the job descriptions that you mentioned? How is that being done? Because there are certain ways to do it, technical ways of looking at some of these things, and there are also some strategic ways of looking. So those are the things that I caught for that. And then thirdly, there's a cautionary tale that I want every one of us to pay attention to. This idea of trade-off with diversity, right? That we have to lower down quality of a pool or the expertise and things of that nature in order to drive in and bring in diverse candidates. We have to be very careful about that, because we have diverse candidates from all walks of life doing all kinds of jobs and all kinds of roles across the country. So that's why oftentimes I ask if we have the right folks looking at those job descriptions and helping, they could tell you that you don't need to bring in, there's no trade-off with diversity and equity and inclusion work per se. It's just equivalency of looking at some of those things in certain areas. It's a very interesting conversation that we could have. And I know in the interest of time, I just wanted to probe it and share with folks that is something that I caught. And then fourthly, is the posting process. Where are we looking? How are we doing it? How intentional are we being in posting? Who are we partnering with to do it? And what are the resources that we're allocating to get it done effectively and sustainably? So those are the few things. However, I do know that a lot of these things take a little bit more of an intentionality from the organizational aspect of this, because as we are recruiting, and particularly as we're interviewing, we ought to also know that candidates are interviewing us in the process. And they're watching our company mission and vision and values and everything that we're doing and saying, do I see myself here? Is this a place that I can see myself working and thriving in this climate? And so your language during your interview process, you may have all the right language in the job description, but during this personal interaction, folks can glean certain things that may and not entice them to come work for you, even if you are labeled as a great place to work for the organization. And so those are a few pieces of things that are coming to my mind as we engage in this. And then how do you leverage all the things that you've done so far, Jeff, in changing your values? That takes a lot of effort to incorporate DEI into your values. Organizational values are one of those things that become taboo. And we talk about this in conscious capitalism conversations, right, Andrew? Become taboo to touch, right? But if you actually are engaged in a more intentional way to look at that, how many of us work at an organization and we never were part of really creating those values, right? All of us have worked in organizations. We showed up, we kind of liked it. We said, okay, I can see myself there. And then you get there and you realize that everything that is posted is always what it seems. So the culture comes in place. So I would say that beginning this work, looking at it from a long-term and longitudinal view of this, and not just what we call the performative aspect of it, will be very important. And whether intentional or unintentionally, we could talk about that as well when the Q&A comes on board. The other piece that I wanted to share before I move on in the interest of time is this idea of interest convergence. And please hold me accountable to explain further what that means when we engage in more conversation with the audience.
Great. Thanks so much, Mo. Always learn so much from you. And now I want to turn to Steve Metzger from LaBella and kind of kick it off with the same question, just real briefly. Tell us a little bit about LaBella and where it was in your journey that you decided to start to make a more intentional progress in diversity and inclusion.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. And thank you, Jeff and Mo. And now I see why you had them go first. Great job, guys, and great job to my fellow cohort member, Jeff, in explaining what General Code does. Just a little bit of background about LaBella Associates. We're an architecture engineering firm headquartered here in Rochester. Today, we're about 1,200 people. I'm happy to report that about 500 of those jobs are in the Rochester area. 10 years ago in 2010, 100% of our employees were in the Rochester area, but we were only 200. Now we're 1,200 and 500. A little less than half of our population resides and works here in Rochester. So Rochester is very important to us, and we grew up here. We're 43 years old now, and I am only the third CEO to occupy the seat for LaBella. Some people may recognize the name Sal LaBella or Sergio Esteban, both towering figures in our local community. And many people ask me, how are you going to fill those shoes? And my answer is, well, I have my own shoes, and I'm going to do things maybe a little differently, but there's no way that I could replace Sergio or Sal one for one. But one of the things, I benefited from, I've been here 26 years, was the culture that was built by Sal, Sergio, and perpetuated over this growth spurt that we've experienced over the last 10 years by the management team. And, like Jeff, we have our core values. They're 4. I could talk all day about them, but I'm just going to name them. They're honesty, stewardship of resources, leadership at all levels, and growth. We're a growth-oriented organization. And so when you combine all those things together, what we like to say is that we've generated an environment of empowerment for our employees. And, I respect what Mo said about these values and people coming on board and realizing that not all of them are followed all the time. I think that we are very conscious of that and make a large effort to make sure that people are experiencing those values to the fullest. And I think we see this reflected in some of these surveys that we participate in. Blind surveys, Jeff mentioned the best places to work type thing. We've been certified through blind surveys as a great place to work, where we don't have a chance to doctor the surveys that come back. It's directly from the employees. So we take a look at that and we say, okay, well, we're doing okay. People are getting it. They enjoy the culture. It's one of the things we rate very highly with. So anyway, so where did it start? So I became CEO last year in 2020, January 2020, and then Pandemic. Great. Great way to start.
Congratulations. Yeah.
Social turmoil, of course, happened last summer quite a bit and continues with the trial that's ongoing today. But that really raised our consciousness, my consciousness, and there was outrage expressed by staff at a level that I had never experienced before. So we sort of recognized we needed to do something. So coincidentally, on June 19th last year, our board adopted a condemnation of racism that sort of pulled in our corporate values, honesty, stewardship, leadership growth, pulled all of that as the backdrop for an expression of outrage against racism. And, we also included that we want to make efforts to become more diverse and inclusive in our culture. So that's sort of where it started. I know we don't have a lot of time. I could talk a lot, but I'll stop there and let Andrew take.
No, it's perfect. I think that, as Mo and others sometimes talk about, sometimes there's a performative or an opportunistic aspect of, putting out the social media statement or you took a step to take a formal resolution of the board of directors. But I know that your commitment goes so much beyond the performative, or so much beyond kind of just that one moment in time, because you've really committed to the work afterwards. So tell us a little bit about the Inclusion Council that was established and some of their kind of early progress.
Yeah, and I'll go back a little bit further and say that I was invited by a colleague to participate in the Exploring Racism group discussions a couple of years ago. And I can remember receiving that invite and saying, this looks interesting. I'm not a racist. This should be easy. I've learned quite a bit since then. I still don't like to think of myself as a racist, but as a perhaps participant in a structure where I didn't stand up and do something about it, more actively, I'm guilty. So anyway, today is a different day. I'm trying to do what I can in my circle to make a difference in that regard. Our DEI council kind of came out as an idea of out of last summer, and sort of this expression of outrage we're hearing amongst our employees, and this idea that these things are totally opposite against LaBella's core values. We're about lifting people up. We're about making opportunities, growth opportunities for people. We don't want to let things get in the way of that. So let's get rid of the baggage of race, sex orientation, gender. Let's focus on making opportunities for our employees and make sure that that's clear and center. So we got a team together, including myself, our president, our HR director, and we put our heads together and sort of dreamed up this idea of an inclusion council, hired an outside consultant to help us facilitate that. She's been wonderful. We added some more people to this, what we call the task force. Got it up to about 8 people of management level folks, and then decided we needed to round out this inclusion council with people from, more diverse areas of the company. So we went through a process where we put this out there and said, if you are interested in participating, fill out this application, write an essay as to why this is important to you, and we'll review those and we'll pick a council. We wanted to limit it to 15. We already had 7, so we could only add 8. We got over 30 applications, so we had to disappoint a lot of really, really qualified candidates. I'm sorry to say, but I'm happy to say that there's so much enthusiasm and passion around the topic within our company. So anyway, we're in the beginning stages. Again, I'll stop there. I could talk to you more about that Inclusion Council, but that's how it came about.
Perfect. And then one of the things that I really wanted to dive into as well, that we chatted a little bit about, was, what are some of the things that you all are doing to try to measure success? Because I know we talked, about some of the times where companies that you're working with or subcontracting with, talking about MWBE certification, and sometimes that's not always a perfect way to measure really what the ultimate goal is, both because of the difficulty of, some organizations to get certified and any number of other things. So can you tell us a little bit about why that maybe didn't work out as a metric for you? And then maybe what some of the other metrics that you're trying to focus on, on this journey?
Yeah. The MWBE programs and DBE on the federal level are tricky for us because they involve requirements of percentages. And a lot of times, as the lead consultant, we expend our resources to secure work, and then there's a certain percentage that must be obligated to MWBEs. It's a great idea and concept, but what we find is many of these MWBEs employ non-diverse workforces themselves, and so that's really, we don't think, the ultimate goal. What we would like to do is be more proactive and more internally work on that and improve our diversity and be able to demonstrate that to our clients. I mean, we work for clients that want our staff to look like they do. The City of Rochester, City School District, many municipal governments, they want to hire a firm that and it involves populations that their constituents, and we want to as well. So we are working on that, and that is a goal of the DEI Council, is to come up with some recommendations on how we can better do that. I will say one project I worked on was the Port of Rochester recently, the marina conversion from the Fast Ferry project, which I also worked on decades ago. But that involved a PLA, a project labor agreement, which was really interesting because the PLA required workforce percentages, of diversity, and measured percentages, which is what we want. We want people performing the work, to be of a diverse group, and not only the people at the top. So we've worked on a few PLAs. The Midtown was also another one, and we sort of learned from that and said we can do this in a better, more meaningful way if we come at it from our angle.
Great. Thank you so much, Steve. And I'm already getting some questions in the chat, so we'll circle back to those to learn more about the Inclusion Council. But I wanted to kick it over to Mo. Again, for those organizations that are trying to make progress, I think that there's all kinds of the old adage of what gets measured gets improved and all sorts of things. But as Steve just discussed, and I've seen it happen countless other times, where sometimes if you have a metric, it gets distorted a little bit, Mo. So what are some of the ways that you try to help organizations think about what they should be measuring to actually make meaningful progress on their goals?
Thank you, Andrew, and thank you, Steve, as always. I would even add a little bit more on top of what doesn't get measured is what doesn't get prioritized will never get done. So to see the prioritization that you're taking in some of these things is really a very good step in the right direction, because internally, if you curate this internally well, then you're positioned and better prepared to face it when you're confronted with any challenges outside, vis-a-vis the limitations with recruitment, limitations with diversifying teams, and so on and so forth. The other piece that comes to mind is there are many ways you could do this, and looking at particularly MWBE certification, the process is grueling for a lot of small businesses. I was on a panel a few weeks back, and we were talking to some of New York State to think about how they could actually streamline the process and make it a little bit easier for folks to be able to get that certification in a very in a specific way. So that's something that I wanted to posit for everybody to just know. But the idea of KPIs with DEI is not new. It's been around for quite some time, and a lot of folks will talk about key performance indicators and goals, but there are really good opportunities to think about what we call DEI scorecards. Diversity scorecards will allow you to take an internal dive and look intentionally as to what are all the different components of your organization that needs to be reviewed and analyzed to see where the blind spots are. And in these scorecards, once you get those scorecards, we do what we call diversity mapping. right? After we find out what those things are, then we will map it onto your organizational aspirations, not need. I want to really distinguish this here. We have to move away from looking at DEI and some of this work as a need, because what happens to needs when they're met, right? Usually that's the issue we're confronted with. When our needs are met, then the diversity officer becomes obsolete, the DEI initiative becomes an obsolete initiative, and so on and so forth. So we map it onto your aspirations beyond your needs. And that's where we get a lot of the work done a lot of times. And then there's also some opportunities to really take a look at what are the goals of the organization. Do we have people that are championed to do this work beyond everybody knowing it's important? That's great. But we need to also have folks to really drive this home, because, as I mentioned, what doesn't get prioritized will not get done. We don't do marketing this way. If you have marketing department, we don't say everybody works here, it's great, so everybody becomes the marketing team. That's not how we do it. Everybody will go out there, if they enjoy working for the company, they will speak very well about it. And that's a type of marketing, right? But we champion and prioritize marketing specific people to really drive home some of the pieces that we want to see. Similarly, if we make diversity a priority and we essentialize it in our processes and we champion people to give them the resources to do it well, then you have somebody who will be thinking through all of this on a regular basis to bring you the data, to coordinate, put it together, to analyze it with you and help you make it a better environment for all your employees. So those are the few things that I caught there with Steve.
Yeah, thanks, Mo. The other thing I remember you really talking with me about a while ago was really to look as well, not only at, your overall workforce and the diversity, but also look at how maybe that changes at different levels of leadership in the organization, right? Like if you have diversity in your kind of frontline workers, but then the higher up you go, the whiter and more male and older it gets, then maybe that's a blind spot as well. So that's definitely something to be aware of.
I love that, Steve, you mentioned the growth aspect of this as part of a core for you. Our work in our organization, we always talk that we're nested between discomfort and growth. Our DEI work is nested between discomfort and growth, and having growth as part of the organizational core value is actually a good thing to really use that, right? To be the conduit for your diversity initiatives and your diversity efforts and everything that you do. Because now it's not new to your people. Now it's not new to the core when you start speaking about some of the things that may come up that will lead to some discomfort in the process, but it's using that as an opportunity for growth would be very helpful for the conversation.
All right. Thanks so much, Mo. So for those of you who are regular RocGrowth attendees, you know that this is something that they frequently do, is to take a little bit of a pause for an ability to spotlight some of the collaborative partners and aligned organizations. And so I want to kick it over to Katie Pulver from Junior Achievement to give a little, minute or two pitch on something that they're working on and could use help from the audience. We have a few of these lined up, and then make sure that you're putting your questions in the chat, and that's where we'll start when we come back. You with us, Katie?
I am. I'm just getting my everything set up.
No problem.
Everybody, I'm so glad to have been a part of today's conversation. It's important work that we are all doing, and certainly we don't get anywhere if we don't have these open discussions and really get on the same page with each other about where our priorities are. So I appreciate being able to hear all of that. And as an organization that deals with young people and certainly with the ages that are going to be aging into your workforce soon, we feel that it's really important to be sure that we offered and put out there an opportunity that we're going to be doing that is called JA Inspire. And this is not just a JA local program, this is a national program that we are going to be launching here. I have some information for you to see on JA Inspire. It is a career exploration fair. It is digitized, so students will be going through a state-of-the-art simulation environment where they can actually see booths of local businesses, and not just local to Rochester, but local to our 25 county footprint in New York State. So think of it as a regional opportunity as well. And the need is there. We have already 7,000 students, almost 8,000 students that their teachers and schools have said they want them to go through. And as you can imagine, in this environment, they can't get you in and they can't get out to you. So if we can merge that all together in this simulation environment that you could have a booth at and be able to have students see you, what a great opportunity for them to learn about you, learn about your priorities, understand the culture and the work opportunities in your business. And this isn't just a one and done situation for us. This is something we will keep going as a long-term strategy, because the reality is schools are going to be limited even after this year on their capacity to get out. And when you think about our urban and our suburban and rural students that we serve, not everybody has the access and equity. So if this levels that playing field to give everyone that chance, then we really have to do the right thing and ensure that we're bringing everyone together to give them that opportunity, not just to learn, but if they're the appropriate age, then they might be able to be eligible for some internships. They could be eligible for some jobs that you might have. All of that is relevant and that you can put in there. So I'm going to, in the chat box, add a link to our website so that you can go see it. And I'm certainly more than willing, I'll put my email address in there as well, to give you a demo, because seeing is believing with this site. Andrew can certainly attest to that. Ask him. One of our other board members who's on here, Dave Romano, today, can attest that they've seen it and they all were like, okay, now we get why you want to do this. So again, thank you. I don't know if there's time for any questions, but certainly feel free to reach out to any of us on that.
Yeah, any questions, please reach out to Katie in the chat, or she'll put her info in the chat as well. And for those that are watching the recording, we'll make sure to include that as well. So if you are looking to diversify your pipeline and you want to look a few years ahead and want to put up a virtual booth and really help expand some career horizons for those young people, please reach out to Katie. Now, thanks again, Katie. I want to kick it over to Graham Hughes from the Community Land Trust, as well as Kelvin Eaton from 540 West Main. They have a gentrification conference coming up.
Thank you. Hi, folks. My name is Graham Hughes. I'm the Special Projects Coordinator for City Roots Community Land Trust. City Roots' mission is to develop communities without displacing any of the people that live in those communities. And we do this through community-owned and managed land that secures permanently affordable housing for the people in our community. A really huge project of our organization and of 540 West Main that we've been putting on every year for the last couple of years is the annual Gentrification Conference. And it's happening this weekend. The theme of our conference this year is resisting gentrification then and now. We'll have sessions that cover the history of gentrification in Rochester and talk about the people and the systems that allow development that results in displacement to happen. We'll talk about communities and individuals who have resisted to being displaced over the years. And finally, what everybody in our community can do to really holistically develop communities without displacing any of the people that have lived there for generations. We think that this is a really important topic. We're going to have some incredible speakers that come. Our keynote is by a gentleman named Gus Newport, who grew up in Rochester in the 50s and 60s. Went on to lead civil rights organizations here before moving to California, where he became the mayor of Berkeley. He's lived an incredible life. And he's 86 and he's still going, and he's very excited to come back to Rochester and share his experiences with us. So we will definitely provide the link in the chat. My colleague Casey from 540 West Main is going to link the registration in the chat. Please feel free to share this widely with your organizations. Y'all can register at whatever level you feel comfortable and appropriate registering. And the last thing I'll say is that if you can't make it to all the sessions on Saturday, everything will be recorded so you can watch them at your own convenience. So definitely register ahead of time if you want those recordings as well. Yeah, I'll just end by saying I personally have been working really hard in this conference, and I'm incredibly excited for the event and the workshops that we're going to put on. So I really hope you all can join us.
Really important conversations. Thank you so much, Graham, and thank you for the work that you've been doing on that. We talk a lot in Conscious Capitalism about trying to create an inclusive prosperity, and lately I've been hearing a lot of people talk about an inclusive recovery too from the pandemic and from so much disruption going on. And so hopefully that can be a great place to continue some of these conversations. So last but not least, I wanted to throw it over to Richard from RocGrowth to talk about an art grant that they have and some of the great people that were able to benefit from that.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is a good segue because we just saw the pandemic worked out all right for wealthy people and not so well for the people who have been denied opportunities. So it's sort of thematic. And one category in our community that has really struggled and has also struggled over the years from segregation and non-inclusion are the artists. So RocGrowth has received some financial support and within several weeks contributed $12,000 to 12 different artists, and most of them of color. And we have an incredible talent pool in our community that we don't avail ourselves. And I suggest that's one of the reasons why Rochester might not be hitting on all cylinders. There are two individuals I want to feature. I'm sorry, I'm speaking too much, but incredible people. We have Jakob Shabazz and we have Christina Kaiser. So they're recipients, but they've created some educational programming that can end up, magnifying the benefit of this program. The other grants went to individual creatives. So Jakob, are you around? I know you're.
You hear me? So yeah, I'm Jakob Shabazz from SankofaStudios.com. I'm one of those people who was impacted by the pandemic. I had a brick and mortar location here in East Rochester, and because of the pandemic, I had to shut down. I did a lot of art classes and art history teaching there, which leads to my project is it's kind of a passion project, something I've been working on for a long time, and it's that it was centered and inspired around the feeling that a lot of Black creatives have when they enter mainstream art galleries, and that we don't see ourselves represented in what's hanging on the walls. And we hear a lot of, the standards, Vincent van Gogh, Monet, Dali, Pollard, we hear those names recited kind of on a loop. And some of those great Black American artists that have contributed to contemporary art and modern art today are left out of those conversations. So I started creating a curriculum. I do webinars around these individuals over the last several years. And this grant has helped to springboard the publishing of the first section of what will be a 12-part curriculum. It's not a book, it's more of a teacher's guide that an educator can take and use it. People that are my age, probably older, remember those red letter teacher guides that the teacher would have. It's in that old school style. So it's very user friendly. A person could come in, it has PowerPoint presentations on CD. It has lectures. So you'll hear my voice putting you to sleep for part of it. And it's very informative, very fun, very interactive. And it's a really good program. The first one is on the life and times of Aaron Douglas, who is known as the father of the Harlem Renaissance. And I should be done publishing that within the next week or so. Thanks to the grant that I got from RocGrowth.
Excellent. And count on the artist to have the best Zoom background on the meeting.
Christina, I know you were able to make it in.
Yeah, I was. Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Christina Kaiser. I am the director of the Arts Collective. If you aren't familiar with us, we're located in the Rochester Public Market. And thank you so much for RocGrowth for this opportunity. The grant that we received will be used towards our teen program. So this will be our second session this summer. It's going to run June, July, and August. And there's going to be 8 sessions that we're working with the teens. They're going to be mentoring with local artists, going to visit local art galleries, and all sorts of different educational and professional development opportunities. The standards that we're following are the New York State learning curriculum. So thanks to this grant, we'll be able to sponsor 4 teens in the Market View Heights area to be able to participate in this program. So Thank you so much. And the application will be available April 15th. So I'll put our website in the chat and you can find out more there.
Fantastic. So yeah, there's several of those art grants, and we'll be highlighting them in RocGrowth, planning some meetings coming up to showcase more of those organizations. With just limited time, actually one of the questions that came up was from Richard, but really I think this was sort of directed at Mo, but maybe if anyone else has other ideas. Richard was saying that many in the RocGrowth community maybe aren't those established organizations like a LaBella that's, you know, large and been around a long time. Maybe they're a 50-person startup and they're trying to get started, you know, quickly and grow and have all these you know, competing priorities. Curious if you have any experience or know of any companies that have really done a great job at baking this in from the start, especially when they're in kind of a high growth entrepreneurial mode and they have those competing priorities.
Yes, actually, that's a very good question. I would actually say it's a wonderful opportunity for those organizations to start off with a culture of inclusivity. Because often in this fast-paced environment, we know what implicit bias research tells us. Part of the Achilles heel of doing diversity work, particularly as it pertains to implicit biases, is us taking shortcuts to get things done quickly. And in those schemas, when we take those shortcuts to do things, that's where the blind spots show up. So even in a fast-paced environment, there are ways to use agile strategies, right, to really do diversity work effectively. We've worked with an engineering firm that, well, not necessarily engineering only, but it was in a very, very regulated industry with refractive surgery, right? And they're doing some research around that. They wanted to hire engineers, they're growing 7-year-old, they're getting into the space. And we had to work with them intentionally to do some agile work with them, and in terms of our search with them and in prepping the leadership team to get up to speed with all the work. That means more work. That's all it means in our space if we're working with a company that is in a growth, small in a growth space. And often those companies and organizations don't have an HR team. They don't have dedicated teams to do recruitment for them. So the blind spots exacerbate very quickly. Because everybody's trying to help recruit, everybody's doing their thing. And in that space, there's very, very interesting research around that. And I could talk about that at length with anyone who wants to reach out to talk about those kinds of spaces. But there are ways to do it using an agile method that we kind of have internally to really meet them where they're at. However, making it clear that sometimes when you do this in that kind of environment without a little bit more intentionality, you can find yourself in all of these blind spots with implicit biases as you make decisions.
Great, thank you. This next one, Steve, is for you. Really just curious, when you created this inclusion council, what kinds of autonomy were they given? What kinds of, you know, goals maybe are you expecting? I know it's maybe early going, but what kinds of things are you seeing? And maybe is there anything that you either wish you knew when you got started or would share with others who might be thinking about starting a similar program of their own?
Now, I would, so far, I think things have gone pretty well. I would say that it's very important if you're going to start one of these things that you have some things in place. Number one, the cultural flag bearer of the organization's got to be leading this message. Can't come from HR, can't come from somebody who's designated. If you really want to do it, it's got to come from that spokesperson, or nobody, you know, not many people will pay as much attention as you want to. The other important thing that we made sure we did, is we brought the management team along with us. Diversity, equity, inclusion, very broad topic, means a lot of things to different people. We wanted to get everybody up to a certain level set. And to do that, we did a unconscious bias training with our consultant. We had Shane Wiegand come in and make a presentation to us about redlining in Rochester, which really struck home with our group, architects, engineers, planners. And sort of got everybody on the same page, like, oh yeah, okay, I get why we're doing this. It's important that we do this, let's go. As far as the council, we have a leadership component to it, but it's being co-chaired, not by me. I've sort of stepped back a little bit. We've got another guy who leads, he's a manager, but in addition to him, it's being co-chaired by a person from quote unquote the ranks, one of our outstanding employees who has a passion around. So the two of them are working together to manage the group, set the agenda, run the meetings, get the feedback. And I know we don't have a lot of time, but what they've identified, they've got 4 buckets they've identified thus far to work on. So it's awareness building and education, creating the culture, community engagement, that's very important to us, and wish we had more time to talk about that. And then policy and procedure reviews. What do we need to do internally to make some of these things happen? So that's where the task force is at in March of 2021. I can't wait to see where they are at the end of the year, but those are the things they're going to be concentrating on.
Great, thank you. Yeah, actually, community engagement was one of the topics we were planning in a program committee for conscious capitalism. So maybe we'll tap you again to hear more about some of those things. Another question, Jeff, was around not only looking at some of the ways that trying to be more inclusive in your own workforce, but and I guess this could apply to either one of you, just in terms of the work that you're doing, but for general code, working with local governments and information and those sorts of things. Have you changed or started to look at any of the client work that you're doing in terms of how to be more inclusive and be a part of positive change in terms of dismantling structural and historic racism?
Yeah, it's interesting, the nature of our work. If you don't know what general code is, a codifier helps local governments organize their laws into a code of laws, and a big part of what we do is analysis. So we see examples of bias and racism in legislative history. It doesn't come up that frequently because of the nature of turnover of laws, but part of our review process and recommendation process is identifying those things and suggesting that those things be eliminated. Like I said, it's not frequent, but we're definitely seeing that. We are looking at, the law needs to evolve kind of the same way everything else does. We're dealing on a daily basis with, things like gender neutrality in legislation. I think that there will be kind of more of a push for other areas of kind of eliminating barriers to inclusivity in the law, as time progresses. And I expect that we'll be actively involved in that at the local level.
Thanks. Anything, Steve, that's come up from your perspective or your work, at LaBella? You were mentioning kind of how the redlining discussions really were eye-opening.
Well, that certainly was one. Again, we're very interested in getting involved in the community. To Richard's point, the fact we're not hitting on all cylinders in Rochester is clear. There's so much talent out there. There's so many talented people that are not being tapped. And I think, as I think about us competing, even as a nation, how do we compete with China? How do we compete with India? And that's tough enough, let alone when we have so many talented people that are not being, tapped into. So to the extent that we can develop some programs here at LaBella to make a small difference in that, we're going to try.
Well, somehow we're already up on time. Very grateful though to all of you for joining us today, both Jeff and Steve, for being so willing to kind of share the successes and also some of the challenges in this work in process journey, and certainly to Mo for sharing some of your expertise. We will make sure that we share this recording. So if you are inspired today and want to share it with a friend or colleague, or want to bring it back into your own organization, that would be wonderful. We love to see that. And I'm sure any of our panelists as well would be willing to chat further if there's further questions. But very grateful for all of you. Grateful to the sponsors of Conscious Capitalism, and also to RocGrowth for partnering on this. This is a continuing discussion, so I can promise that there will be plenty more where this came from in terms of really hitting it on some of these issues and continuing to make progress in our community. I think the discussion is necessary and needed and urgent, and grateful for all of you for participating today, hopefully learning a little bit. and bringing some back to your organization. And please don't hesitate to reach out either to myself or to Richard at RocGrowth. We'd love to hear, your ideas for future discussions. Sounds like community engagement might be one of them, but also share with us any success stories. What companies should we be highlighting, and who's really innovating and leading in the space in Rochester, because we really need it, and we're going to have to do it together. So thank you so much for joining us today. Hope you get a chance to go enjoy some of the sunshine.